WADR, promoting dialogue. It's midday in Dakar. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. This is Newslink. First, the headlines. Defense Authority denounced international coalition against Burkina Faso. African Union Commission Chair raises alarm concerns over security situation in Africa.
The current security trends on our continent are very alarming. Sudan is a case in point.
The first batch of 376 Nigerian students trapped in war-torn Sudan arrive Abuja.
Of course, we don't blame them. They are also basically also have to be careful for some security reasons. So that was why they would not allow people in.
And the Malian government receives at least 147 migrants from Niger deported by Algeria. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Imoh Edet with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us. Let's begin in Burkina Faso, where the Defense Minister, Colonel Major Kassoum Coulibaly, has announced an international coalition against Burkina Faso, saying the country has even recorded violations of its airspace. Coulibaly made these statements during a briefing on Wednesday with Burkinabe civil society on the actions undertaken in the fight against terrorism. Without giving details on the composition of this coalition, the Burkinabe minister denounced the double language of some parties in the fight against terrorism. Since 2015, Burkina Faso has faced recurrent terrorist attacks in several regions. The government has decreed the order of general mobilization and warning in order to give a legal framework to all actions undertaken by the state in the fight against terrorism. The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, has expressed concerns about the security situation in Africa. Mahamat, during the 75th Ordinary Session of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights in the Gambian capital Banjul, described the current trend as very alarming and cited the conflict in Sudan as an example. In the same vein, the president of the African Court on Human and People's Rights raised concerns about some African states' non-compliance with the court's rulings, with some even refusing to sign their treaty. WDR's Banjul correspondent Sangule Danko has more in this report.
Fighting between Sudanese armed forces and paramilitaries loyal to a former warlord has been ongoing for over 2 weeks. This and other security issues in Africa are being discussed at the 75th Ordinary Session of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights in Banjul. The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, whose statement was read by Ambassador Bankole Adeoye during the meeting, expressed the concern about the state of security trends in Africa.
The current security trends on our continent are very alarming. Sudan is a case in point. We are sending out a signal that the African Union should focus on preventive measures and ensure the protection, the safeguarding, and the promotion of the culture of the respect of human rights and human dignity. These security challenges happening on our continent has given us the need to address early warning and early response.
Justice Imani Aboud, president of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, expressed concerns about countries' attitudes towards the court. Some nations withdrew from the court's treaty due to unfavorable judgments, while others refused to adhere to its rulings.
4 states that had initially deposited the declaration decided to withdraw their declaration, seemingly after the court delivered judgments against them. From the above statistics and scenarios, one would be tempted to question why the court was established in the first place, if NGOs and individuals cannot access it directly, if states do not welcome judgments against them, if states openly refuse to comply with court decisions.
Remy Ngoy Lumbo, chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, called for increased dialogue to resolve conflicts and stressed the importance of respecting human rights in Africa, while Mamadou Tangara, Gambia's foreign minister, said human rights issues in Africa need to be addressed.
The continent continues to experience significant human rights challenges that need to be addressed. Problems ranging from employment opportunities, poverty alleviation, and sustainable development are a challenge to our beloved continent.
The African Commission recently condemned the indiscriminate bombing and shelling in Sudan using strong language. The ongoing ordinary session in Banjul is expected to initiate policies to prevent potential human rights issues like the ones currently faced by the people of Sudan. For Newslink and West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Sankula Janko reporting from Banjul.
In Benin, the government has announced its plans to investigate the recent terrorist attack that occurred in Keru, a town in the northern part of the country. The attack took place on Tuesday and resulted in several casualties. The government spokesperson, Wilfred Liadre, who made the announcement during a press briefing of the Council of Ministers on Wednesday. As a Guberica report, Ngbeji stated that the attack on Keru could have been avoided, and as such, the government has decided to take action.
The Benin government spokesman Leander Ngbeji retreated that the government suspects a failure in the chain of operations of the Defense and Security Forces regarding the recent Keru attack. In an interview with local media, he stated that the same report indicates that there was most certainly a failure in the chain of operations for the Defense and Security Forces to deploy preventively in order to avoid this. This observation, according to him, is shocking and has led the President of the Republic to insist on a fact-finding mission on the ground to assess the real circumstances of the occurrence of this tragedy. According to Ngbeji, the investigation will not only identify the lessons to be learned from the attack, but also initiate sanction measures against all officials of the Defense and Security Forces who are in charge of the conduct of operations and have failed in their duty. Ngbeji also commented on the tactics of the criminals responsible for the attack, saying that when these criminals try to establish themselves and do not succeed, they work to demoralize the populations by carrying out retaliatory operations of this macabre nature. He noted that attempts and incursions are being fought and thwarted as they should be. The Keru attack has resulted in at least 7 deaths and several people missing. As of now, no official report has been communicated on the tragic incident.
Guberica filed that report. Let's turn our attention now to Sierra Leone, where the Electoral Commission has approved President Julius Maada Bio's candidacy for the upcoming June general elections as a second term. Along with Bio, the electoral umpire has also approved the main opposition party's nominee, Samura Kamara, who was the runner-up in the last presidential vote in 2018. Kamara lost to Bio, a former military ruler who had previously failed in a presidential bid 4 years earlier. James Japan has the details.
Sierra Leonean President Julius Maada Bio will be running for re-election after a first term which experts say was marked by economic hardship and rampant inflation worsened by the country's recovery from the 2014 Ebola outbreak before the coronavirus pandemic struck. The government's perceived failure to cushion the effects of rising prices sparked rare anti-government protests in August 2020 that killed dozens. Bio's opponent, Samuel Kamara, 72, stated that the country will face systemic challenges such as the inability to provide food and electricity for the citizens and the lack of economic development, growth and infrastructure. Meanwhile, Bio, 58, aims to continue his efforts to improve public education by providing free education at the primary and secondary levels and boosting agricultural production to improve food security. In addition to the presidential election, voters in Sierra Leone will also elect members of parliament, mayors, and local councillors in June. This will be the 5th elections since the country's brutal 10-year civil war ended in 2002.
James Japan reporting there.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
The first set of Nigerian evacuees from Sudan have arrived at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, the nation's capital. The returnees touched down on board a naval airplane and Air Peace aircraft at about 11:35 p.m. on Wednesday. Usman Marin, Abuja, report.
After about 7 harrowing days on the Egyptian border, it was a sigh of relief for the first set of evacuees to touch down safely on Nigerian soil. While receiving the evacuees at the airport, the Director of Migration, National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons, Mrs. Catherine Udida, said 94 evacuees were flown in the naval plane, while a commercial aircraft, Air Peace, had 282 people on board. The chairman of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Mrs. Abike Dabiri Eriwa, said it was a huge relief to receive the returnees, considering what they went through in Sudan. She added that more are expected to arrive in the country today. One of the evacuees who spoke with newsmen narrates her experience.
We left our homes last week Wednesday to go to Egypt, but we're stranded at the border for a week. Because of course we don't blame them. They also have to be careful for some security reasons. So that was why they would not allow people in. Conditions have to be met. So Alhamdulillah, the Nigerian government managed to meet the requirements, and because I was in constant communication with the Nigerian affairs and every other person involved, and they were walking around the clock, they were on their feet, they tried their best. Though people were complaining, but the conditions given by the government of Egypt was too. Yes, they did everything within their means, and Alhamdulillah.
There are still over 2,000 Nigerians expected to return to the country from Sudan. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Meanwhile, the Ghana Refugee Board has registered over 1,000 immigrants from Burkina Faso over the past few months, according to reports. However, this has caused tensions between locals and foreigners in parts of the Savannah region, which fears a possible infiltration of terrorists and other criminals in the country. WDL's Dakar correspondent Atevin Lawson report.
According to reports, the recent influx of Burkinabés into the Savannah region is due to the ongoing conflict in the country. Many of them enter the country through border towns in the Upper East, Upper West, and Savannah regions. Youth in the Savannah region, specifically in the Fufuso community, however, say that there has been a surge in the influx of foreign nationals, raising security concerns. The youth have started mobilizing to protest against their presence. Salifu Adam is a youth leader in the community.
There are more than 300 currently as I'm speaking to you. So it's a threat to we the youth, because for the past 5-6 months ago, there was an information and videos circulating that terrorists have flipping around people community, which we don't know. We suspect that this will be one of them. They just move around. We don't know where they are coming from. No NADMON official have come to check on them. No Seta Gwenja, this assembly has not also come to our aid.
While the youth have decided to put their protest on hold and allow the authorities to investigate the matter, the Ghana Refugee Board says it has registered over 1,000 Burkinabés who have gone through the right processes. The executive secretary of the board, Tete Padi, adds that many more are entering the country as the situation in Burkina Faso worsens, hence the board is working to register them. He, however, assured that the board will work to ensure the safety and security of Ghanaians in the process.
We've registered so far over 1,000 Burkinabés who have actually gone through the right process. But we also know that there are several more who are coming in, given that the situation is not getting any better. But we do not compromise the procedures at all and make sure that whatever needs to be done to maintain our own safety and that of the refugees is done.
The government also maintains that security has been beefed up along the borders. Reporting for Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Atiewin Imbila Lawson in Accra.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Defense Authority denounced international coalition against Burkina Faso. African Union Commission Chair raises alarming concerns over security situation in Africa. The first batch of 376 Nigerian students trapped in war in Sudan arrive at Abuja. And still ahead, the Malian government receives at least 147 migrants from Niger deported by Algeria. We will also be discussing the evacuation process in Sudan, and we do have sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Don't forget you can listen to us live on WADR.org. We now head to Mali, where the government has welcomed at least 147 Malian migrants from Niger who were deported by Algeria. The Chief of Staff of the Ministry of Malians Established Abroad and African Integration received the migrant, according to Mohamed Lamine Ben, who is responsible for migration at the High Council of Mali. Most of these migrants had attempted to cross the Mediterranean from Algeria and were returned by the Algerian authorities to the Niger border. Tawfiq Abdul Nasser completes the story.
The Chief of Staff of the Ministry of Malians Established Abroad and African Integration, Mohamed Ag Al-Bakr, announced that 147 Malian nationals have returned to the country from Niger. Among them were 3 children and 3 women. The statement also mentioned that 3 charter flights and 5 commercial flights are scheduled for May, bringing back nearly 650 Malian nationals from Libya, Niger, Algeria, Chad, and Italy. In March 2023, 135 Malians, including 25 women and 13 children, returned to Bamako from Tunisia. This initiative is part of the Malian government's efforts to repatriate Malian nationals stranded in other countries due to various reasons. However, the situation of many Malians attempting to cross the Mediterranean is still precarious. The majority of people, including women and children, use Libya as a transit point where they are vulnerable to violence, kidnapping, torture, and extortion. In June 2022, a tragic shipwreck of the Libyan coast claimed the lives of 22 Malian migrants, including 3 children. The Malian government said it is working with its partners to address this issue and prevent such tragedies from happening.
Tawfiq Abdul Nasser found that report. Senegalese nationals have been evacuated from Khartoum to Dakar through a voluntary request. The country's Minister of Foreign Affairs announced on Wednesday that it had evacuated about 20 Senegalese and Bissau Guineans from Sudan. A country plunged for 2 weeks in fighting between armed groups that led to the mass evacuation of foreign nationals. Guinea-Bissau shares the same border with Senegal. According to the statement, both nationals for voluntary return were transported from Khartoum to Cairo and then transported to Dakar, which did not specify the number of Senegalese who live in Sudan or to be repatriated. In Guinea, the trial of the 28 September 2009 massacre saw 2 new witnesses come forward on Wednesday. Mamadou Conte and Jano Mamadou Jallo both claimed to have been victims of assault and battery, as well as other forms of violence during the 2009 massacre. Conte, an activist of the Union of Republican Forces Party, recounted how he and his colleagues were trying to mobilize from Matam to rally at the big stadium in Conakry, but encountered obstacles along the way. When they eventually reached the stadium, soldiers arrived and began attacking protesters. Jallo, who was also a victim of assault and battery, was arrested and later released after giving some money. The hearing will resume next Monday.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
Let's now head back to Accra as Atewi Mbelalosin is on standby for the newspaper review.
Greetings from Accra, Ghana. Welcome to the newspaper review for today, Thursday, May 4, 2023. Let's change things up a little bit and start with some business news. The Business Finder newspaper, the screaming headline says Ghana bags $3.5 billion from non-traditional exports in 2022. Then a banner headline, EcoBank launches double salary promo reloaded, and Newmont Africa reliable development partner. Those are the stories on the front page of the Business Finder newspaper. We'll also look at the Business Analyst newspaper. The screaming headline, we will kick against any law that stifles free speech. That's according to the Ghana Journalists Association president. And that's to mark World Press Freedom Day, which was yesterday. Another World Press Freedom Day story, that's a banner headline, says free expression is the oxygen driving democratic societies. That's according to Gifty Afeni-Dadzi. She was the first female president of the Ghana Journalists Association, and she served 3 terms in that position. So definitely a renowned journalist she is. Another banner headline, 2/3 of Ghana's unemployed population are women. That's according to the Ghana Statistical Service, a report issued by the service. And then the final banner headline, commercial taxi drivers to be hooked onto electronic systems soon. That's according to the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. Last but not least, President Akufo-Addo, he said government policies will stimulate patronage of vehicles assembled in Ghana. So those are the business stories on the Business Analyst newspaper. Let's now move on to some other headlines in major dailies in Ghana. The Ghanaian Times expressed opinion on matters fiercely. That's according to Justice Ajay, and he is charging journalists to do so as the world marked Press Freedom Day yesterday. Then we have, that was a screaming headline. Let's look at some banner headlines in the Ghanaian Times newspaper. More than 900 Ghanaians die from prostate cancer. That's according to the Tulsi Cancer Institute. Unfortunate. Then we have another banner headline. Government celebrates media, urges greater focus on economic rights. And there's a picture there of the Information Minister, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah. From the Ghanaian Times newspaper, let's go to the Daily Guide newspaper. The screaming headline, it's official, Bawumia joins NPP race. This is stories about the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, who has declared his intention officially to contest for the flag bearership of the governing New Patriotic Party. Banner headlines, Parliament considers CJ nominee and amend laws against journalists. Then we have another man kills lover in a very unfortunate story. And Joe Garte storms Ahafo region for votes, and he's a politician who has been tipped as one who will contest for the flag bearership of the governing New Patriotic Party. The Daily Graphic newspaper, media must cease excessive politicization. That is according to the Ghana Journalists Association on Press Freedom Day. Then that's a screaming headline. Some banner headlines, MMDCE's enacting capacity lawful. Supreme Court dismisses Dafiamekpo suit. And more women unemployed than men, according to the Ghana Statistical Service. And ensuring peace for accelerated development, our concern, according to President Nana Akufo-Addo. So those are the headlines in the Daily Graphic newspaper. Wrapping up newspaper review for today, I am Atiewin Imbila Lawson. Back to you in the studio.
Many thanks, Atiewin, for the review.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
In this interview segment, we will take a look at the evacuation process in Sudan. Earlier, you heard that the first set of Nigerian evacuees from Sudan arrived at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, the nation's capital. The returnees touched down on board a naval plane, an Air Peace aircraft, at about 11:35 p.m. on Wednesday. However, not without some diplomatic rancor between countries evacuating their nationals from Sudan and the Egyptian government. Our Abuja correspondent Juan Maro was at the airport in Abuja at the reception of the evacuees, and he brings us details.
We waited for the arrival of the first batch of the evacuees from Sudan who took off from Egypt. Of course, at around 11:30 p.m. yesterday, Wednesday, that's when the naval aircraft and the Air Peace, that is a commercial aircraft that volunteered to help the Nigerian government bringing back citizens into the country, touched down at the airport. And about 360 of them were, of course, received by the officials, government officials, and, of course, family members and loved ones.
Are this the final evacuees that expected, or we still have more people that will be arriving in Nigeria?
No, according to the chairman of Nigeria in Diaspora Commission, that is Abike Dabiri Eriwa, this is the first batch of evacuees, and they said we have about more than 2,000 actually who are still in different places in different borders, particularly in Egypt and, of course, Ethiopia. as it is, of course, we have not even gotten to the half of the people expected to be evacuated back to the country. So this is definitely the first batch. And as she mentioned yesterday, we are expecting another batch to arrive later today.
Well, there have been some controversies surrounding the evacuation, especially the fact that $1.2 million was allocated for this. And this actually raised some dust, which got some Nigerians talking. What has been the defense of the government as regards this $1.2 million, almost 600 million naira?
Like just the government officials responded to people who know something about money is that when figures are mentioned, people try to rationalize and, of course, at some point get to ask questions. But in this situation, an emergency situation such as we have in Sudan, where multi-sectoral aid approach was adopted, where you have different government offices involving, for example, the National Emergency Management Agency, the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants, and Internally Displaced Persons. You have Nigerians in Diaspora Commission. You have Ministry of Foreign Affairs, all coming to work together to ensure that citizens are evacuated back into the country safely. Of course, there was need for purchase of buses, and that was what led to approval of that said amount. And the buses were purchased, but of course, it depends on which of the offices you ask. A lot of people will tell you they were not aware of it. The only official government office that responded to the question on especially the expenditure was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they justified that, in fact, that money wasn't even enough, but it was just enough to get things started. We spoke to one of the evacuees yesterday, and she also agreed that, yes, there were people who raised doors and there were complaints, especially by the evacuees when they heard of the amount allocated for that exercise.
Well, Usman, quickly before we round off this conversation, what will be your take on the fact that as African countries, we still find it difficult to do trade, to travel to each other's country? For example, the evacuation in Sudan. Shouldn't the African Continental Free Trade promote all of this?
It takes occurrences like this to expose or to put light to some of the claims we make as Africans. When we talk about African unity, we talk about ECOWAS, we talk about African Union, where, especially African Union, where you have all the countries on the continent from time to time coming together under one union. Yet, on a situation like this, this now puts the lie to a lot of fallacies that we have in our heads about African unity. Because if it is impossible, for example, for me to move freely from here to, say, Benin Republic, and from Benin Republic through Togo to Ghana, without having to stop from one point to another to explain myself, even after presenting all the necessary documents, then of course we have a very, very long way to go.
Osman Omar there in Abuja. All right, it's now time for sport with Sankle Janko.
Hello there, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. The draw of the FIBA African pre-qualifying tournaments for the Paris 2024 Olympic Games has been conducted by the African basketball governing body. Giants Tunisia are placed in Group B alongside DR Congo, Cameroon and Guinea. Meanwhile, Group A includes Nigeria, Senegal, Uganda and Mali, according to the FIBA basketball official website. All the pre-qualifying matches are set to take place in Lagos, Nigeria from 12 to 20 May 2023. Reigning African champions, the Carthage Eagles, are the bookies' favorites in this group as the only team to have Olympic experience thanks to their participation in the London 2012 Games. But the eventual winners of these groups will qualify for the qualifying tournament to represent Africa in Paris 2024 Olympics. Elsewhere, US Monastir and Club Africain have reached the final of the playoffs following their respective victories in the series. Monastir got to the final after beating Etoile du Sahel 79-67 in Game 4. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to our listeners in the Gambia via Hot 104.3 FM Banjul, and in Liberia on Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM Lofa County, and in Ghana on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi. Inyas Bilmu has been on the console. Let's continue the conversation on Twitter, Instagram at WDR News, and Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. I am Imoh Edet. Good afternoon.
News, talk, music. Get it all 24 hours on West Africa Democracy Radio.